Tonight, Labour is putting new pressure on the government with a further indication that they will end up backing a new public vote on Brexit. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is in Westminster. Gary.
Well, we all know that Jeremy Corbyn is quite capable of proclaiming a policy he is extremely proud and pleased with very loudly and clearly. If you read the statement that was put out tonight about what he's just been briefing Labour MPs on, which is a tiptoeing, a serious step, probably more than a tiptoeing, towards support for a second referendum, it's been extracted rather like a tooth. I mean, he's not proclaiming this, but I think the supporters of a second referendum are going to grab what is in this statement and what Jeremy Corbyn has said to MPs behind me there and try and nail it down to confuse the metaphors a bit and make sure that Jeremy Corbyn is now in an immovable position where he backs a second referendum. One of the MPs who was in that meeting just now, actually he's still in there texting me very kindly, said that Jeremy Corbyn reading out the support for a second referendum said that it was a bit like watching a hostage read out a ransom note. It felt like Keir, I think a reference to Keir Starmer, and Cooper, Yvette Cooper I suspect, had taken over our leadership. All of this still leaves many questions unanswered. Exactly what will be on the ballot paper, though a statement from Labour is saying Remain will be an option on a ballot paper in a second referendum, and whether Labour can actually turn around a House of Commons they don't run and make sure that they get a second referendum. There are rebels on the Labour side who will break a whip even if they're told they've got to back this, and there are probably not at the moment enough Tories to try and backfill those Labour rebels. So there's a real battle on. There are Labour supporters in Momentum who are messaging me saying that they're going to work in the grassroots and try and put pressure on MPs to make sure that they do back a second referendum. We now have a sort of schedule for where things go. Tomorrow, a statement by the Prime Minister, and then a vote on a series of amendments tomorrow, but the key amendment on a referendum probably comes on the 12th of March, the same day as the meaningful vote. Another extraordinary day in Sharm el-Sheikh, in Egypt, and in the corridors of Labour power.
Depending on what poll you look at, more than 70% of Labour Party members would like a second referendum. 90% of them would vote to remain if they got the choice again. But Jeremy Corbyn has been holding out against this tide of opinion. He and some of his closest allies shared the wariness or hostility of Labour MPs representing strong pro-Leave seats. Now the Labour leadership is signalling that resistance may be crumbling. In a meeting of Labour MPs tonight, Jeremy Corbyn is saying when it comes to the vote on Theresa May's deal, now expected on March the 12th, Labour may table an amendment that demands a second referendum, putting her deal to the voters. It comes after defections from Labour to the independent group of MPs last week. All these MPs support a second referendum, and senior Labour figures wanted to give like-minded MPs a reason to stay in the party.
We'll have to look at the detail, but on the surface of it, it looks like a positive development, move in the right direction. But as I say, we'll have to look at the detail. If Labour is embracing the idea of a final say referendum, I think we would be delighted. It changes the landscape here at Westminster entirely.
Theresa May spent the morning in Sharm el-Sheikh. The Egyptian resort wasn't looking at its most welcoming for EU visiting leaders. The talks venue perhaps lacking in intimacy. But in the margins of this summit, Theresa May pressed the flesh with EU leaders and heard firsthand from the Dutch Prime Minister concern about the implications for business of a no-deal Brexit.
There's so many companies who are prepared. Just think that he was this hard Brexit. I said he's speaking about.
We're working to make sure that we get a solution.
I know. But just in case.
Mark Rutte later said the UK was sleepwalking into no deal and needed to wake up. The German Chancellor asked Theresa May if newspaper reports claiming Number 10 had prepared a request for a 2-month postponement of Brexit were true. European Council President Donald Tusk was one of several EU figures who said delaying the date of Brexit from March 29th was common sense.
I believe that in the situation we are in, an extension would be a rational solution. But Prime Minister May still believes that she's able to avoid this scenario.
Theresa May refused to be drawn on whether she was ready to ask for that extension.
Look,
An extension to Article 50, a delay in this process, doesn't deliver a decision in Parliament. It doesn't deliver a deal. We have it within our grasp. As I've just said, I've had a real sense from the meetings I've had here, conversations I've had with EU leaders in recent days, a real sense that we can achieve that deal. It's within our grasp to leave with a deal on the 29th of March.
Theresa May tomorrow has to say something stronger than that in a common statement if she's to stop ministers en masse defying her leadership. Ministers said there was hectic work behind the scenes still on exactly what the Prime Minister will say.
Well, joining me now from Westminster is the Labour MP Peter Kyle, who is proposing the amendment, which includes a second referendum. What do you understand Labour's position to be tonight? Is Labour now backing a second referendum?
It is, Christian. It's very clear now that Jeremy and the Shadow Cabinet have endorsed a policy whereby it tries to put forward again to the Commons this week our full negotiating stance, should Labour be in the position to negotiate. But it is very, very clear now that should that not be successful in the House of Commons this week, that it will move towards embracing going back to the people in one form or another of a referendum.
Will that be in March? Will that be on March the 12th, or will your amendment go forward this week on Wednesday?
Well, the amendment I'm proposing is all about getting a decision and not a delay, if you will. What I'm trying to do, and working with Phil Wilson, the MP for Sedgefield, is we've found a way of allowing her bill and the legislation to pass through Parliament without endorsing it, but pass through Parliament so that it has a confirmatory vote amongst the population. The difference between a confirmatory vote and a full referendum is that a confirmatory vote is binding and it is based around the deal itself. So it means that it wouldn't be a never-endum, it wouldn't be the best of three. It means that once people have voted on it, then that is it, and it goes on to statute, or we remain in the status quo. But we can say to people there would be a definitive end to the Brexit nightmare.
And is that going ahead on Wednesday? That's the amendment you're submitting for this week? Or are you saying that will now wait until the night of the meaningful vote?
You're quite right. This will now wait until the night of the meaningful vote, although we still don't know precisely when that will be. Don't forget, Theresa May, she keeps on chopping and changing her mind. Until just yesterday, we believed that would be this coming Wednesday, but she's moved that back. And this Wednesday will now focus on the Cooper-Bowles amendment, which is all about trying to stop no deal. Yeah. So that will be the focus of the Commons this week.
And are you talking to the leadership about the Labour official position being to back your amendment?
Of course I am, and I've been engaged actually with the leadership for quite a while now. Phil and I have met with John McDonnell many times. I'm in daily contact with Keir Starmer, who has been appointed by the Shadow Cabinet in order to work on this agreement. But most crucially of all, I'm actually talking to government ministers as well. I've been called actually from government ministers, from Tory backbenchers, right the way through to the very top of government, have been calling and asking questions about this to sound out different aspects of it, to discuss the wording of the amendment. This is a backbench amendment that has support now from the Labour front bench, and it has growing support within government itself.
Please, Carl, thank you very much indeed. Well, we can now talk to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Emily Thornberry. Is Peter Kyle right that Labour is now backing a second referendum and that will kick in from March the 12th?
Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try again to put forward what we think is an entirely reasonable and proper way of leaving the European Union, one that works, one that's been accepted well by experts in this country, and one which has been accepted in Europe as workable. And we have been suggesting this for 18 months, and it's what we wrote to Theresa May about.
Let's assume that's rejected.
OK, so we will try. I mean, we are going to try and get that through. So if it doesn't, then yes, we are therefore left with what Theresa May is up to. I mean, she hasn't tried to engage Parliament at all. You know, she lost her vote by 230, wasn't it? You know, the beginning of January, and she keeps asking for more time and more time and more time.
But what is your policy on the referendum?
So we think her game is my deal or no deal, and we think that her deal is disastrous. We think that no deal is disastrous. And so if that is what the choice is, then we will be asking for that to go before the public, for there to be a public vote.
And the question would be between what? Between no deal and the deal, or would Remain be an option?
I mean, the difficulty is to a certain extent, we have to react to what it is that she does. So we're not entirely sure how this is going to play out. But what we're saying is that if we can't get our deal through, if we can't get through what we think is entirely reasonable, then anything else will be a disastrous Tory Brexit, and we would ask for the public to be able to have a vote on that.
Are you saying it's possible you could back a referendum that didn't have Remain on the list of choices?
No. So what I'm saying is that we would have a referendum on whatever deal it is that may or may not pass through Parliament, and we would be saying to the people, do you want this or do you want to remain? And so it would be like a confirmation referendum, a bit like what happened with the Good Friday Agreement. So that would be it. So there would be no Tory Brexit without there being a vote from the public.
Right. And which side of that referendum would you be on personally? Would you back the government's Brexit, or would you suggest we remain in the European Union?
Oh, listen, it's no secret. I think that it is in Britain's interest for us to remain in the European Union. I've always thought so, and I continue to think so. And so if there is a vote of that sort, I certainly will be campaigning for us to remain.
And would you be on the same side as Jeremy Corbyn?
Yeah, of course.
So he will definitely campaign in a referendum, in a second referendum, to remain in the European Union. You're in no doubt about that.
If it's a choice between a disastrous Tory Brexit or no deal and remaining, then that is what we will have to do. And basically we are doing as instructed by Labour Party conference. We have gone through all the list of things that we've been asked to do. We have voted against the deal because it didn't meet our tests. We have called for a general election. We haven't succeeded at that. We've put all options on the table. We've explained to her in very clear terms what will work and what she will get a majority of Parliament to agree to. She's refusing to do that. We are trying again to put forward our solution for Brexit. And if none of those work, then if it's a choice between that and a disastrous Tory Brexit, we will be campaigning to remain, because that's all we can do.
This is extraordinary, Emily Thornberry. I mean, at the weekend, you said you would rather die than join the independent group of MPs. And here you are tonight, backing their policy. You're on the same side as you've joined them.
No, I think if over the last few weeks, I at times may have seemed aggrieved at some of the people in the People's Vote, or perhaps some of the people in this new independent group who have been trying to say that we are in some way on a different page to them. It's because I've known that the discussions that we've been having have been in line with our conference policy.
But you are on the same side as them now, aren't you? I mean, you agree with them on Brexit.
Labour's policy is as Labour's policy has always been. So we have gone through the options and we are running out of time. We have 32 days between now and when we're supposed to leave. We will not allow a no deal. We will support Yvette's amendment in order to try to stop a no deal. And if she continues, and if Theresa May continues to insist on a disastrous Tory Brexit or no deal, we think that that should go before the public, and that is entirely in line with our conference policy and has been since September. I'm sure you've noticed.
Now, are you sure you can carry your party, though? Because you weren't able to entirely in previous votes. There were Labour rebels. Tonight, Caroline Flint has apparently said in the meeting you've just come out of that, there's no way Labour will be able to unite around having a second referendum, especially one in which you campaign to remain. So, I mean, would you get this passed?
Well, I do make it a rule of never talking about what happens in the Parliamentary Labour Party, but it's hardly a secret that, this is a very difficult issue for everyone. And essentially, Labour represents constituencies that voted to leave and remain. We have a great mixture of views within the Labour Party. In that way, we reflect the country.
I mean, even Stephen Kinnock isn't sure about this.
And our policy has always been to try to keep the country united and to try to make sure that we move forward. That's the way that statespeople ought to behave in these circumstances, and that is what we have been trying to do.
Can I just clarify one thing? Because in that answer before, you just said, if Theresa May presses ahead with a choice between her deal and no deal, then you will back the second referendum. If the Cooper Amendment is passed and no deal is effectively taken off the table for a short period.
Well, for a short period, yes.
Are you still backing the second referendum? You're not finding a way to back out of backing a second referendum?
Listen, it's perfectly clear. We either get our policy through or anything else goes to the public. goes to the public for a public vote. That is how it's going to work. If Yvette Cooper's amendment goes through and more time is bought, then it is a time. The challenge for the Prime Minister is to then listen to what it is that we're saying, and for us to say to her, this will work, Theresa. Nothing else will. And if she continues to insist that it's no deal or her deal, then we will find ourselves, unfortunately, at the end of the additional time that we're given, in the same position as we are now. So we need to have some sort of movement.
One of your colleagues told Gary Gibbon that Jeremy Corbyn looked like he'd been taken hostage and was reading out one of those hostage statements. Has he been sort of dragged kicking and screaming to this position?
It's so completely unfair that. People complain about bullying, and the sort of things that they say about Jeremy Corbyn are appalling. Jeremy we have had so many of these meetings, the Brexit subcommittee, where we have been looking carefully at what we should do next, and we have been moving forward together. And it is a leadership team where we debate carefully and with respect for one another, and we come to collective decisions, and Jeremy leads that.